If you have followed the rules but feel unsatisfied with where that's gotten you, this podcast is for you.
We'll help you learn how to reach your goals through creativity, intuition, and flow.
Welcome to the Flow into Authenticity podcast.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello. Here we are.
Esther, where in the world are you right now?
I'm in a closet in Sacramento, California. I'm on vacation. I just went to see Bjork last weekend in San Francisco and had probably one of the most amazing nights of my life.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Yeah. And I took a little trip up the coast and it was really wonderful. So coming down from all that.
Yay.
How about you guys?
Leslie?
Nothing quite as exciting as a Bjork show, but I just am recovering from a rough week. Got the COVID booster and it kind of knocked me on my behind. So I'm just excited to be feeling better this week and get back to the land of the living here. How about you, Allison?
I am sleepy. My kids have not been sleeping well, so we haven't been sleeping well. So I'm dragging a little bit, I'll be honest, but otherwise, good. Things are going well. So last time we had an episode about our stories, kind of introducing everyone to us and the stories from our lives that demonstrate how we have felt really stuck at some point in our lives and needed to make a change. And we ended the last episode with putting out a challenge to you about identifying where you feel stuck. So we're going to talk about that idea of feeling stuck today. The first step in making a change is just realizing what isn't working. So Esther, can you give us some insight into why we get stuck?
Oh, it's a big topic, right? Yeah. So I think, so many of us have felt this way. Probably all of us have felt this way. And, I think what a lot of us don't realize is that we are meant to be growing and expanding all the time. As humans, we are meant to be really growing and evolving. And if we're not doing that, then we feel stuck. And I like to say that your intuition is your GPS to your most authentic self and your most authentic path. And I really see your intuition as a guide to helping you to that next level of wherever you're growing to. So in a way, like that could feel like stuckness. So when you feel stuck, it's really actually like a good thing. I mean, I know it feels like sucky, but if you can start to see it as like, oh, something's not right, it's a little clue of, okay, what am I growing into, right? And so whether you feel stuck at your job or maybe your living situation, whatever it is, there's always kind of something that we're growing into. And so we'll kind of get into what can we do about it? What does it feel like? Maybe some stories from us in this episode and how can we kind of take the next step?
That reminds me a lot about pain, which is kind of a weird thing to talk about. My mom has like a freakishly high pain tolerance. And because of that, she has some serious issues with her body. Like her hamstring isn't attached the right way. And she's got, all these broken bones that healed all messed up because she didn't know she had a broken bone. So even though it seems like a good thing to have a really high pain tolerance, to not feel pain, you're missing out on that signal that your body
Yeah.
is trying to tell you something is wrong and you need to get it taken care of. So that kind of sounds like what you're saying right now.
Yeah, I like to say that. So if your intuition is your GPS, right? It's your guide, it's your map. Your feelings they're like road signs. So exactly what you're saying. So like a lot of people, they say like feelings don't matter, just push them down, like just think positive. But your feelings they're like trying to tell you something along the way. So exactly. Like if I am feeling sick or something's wrong with my body, I wouldn't just be like, oh, I'm just coughing up blood, whatever. I'm just going to
just get over it.
I'm just going to get over it. Right. Yeah. But feelings are the same way. So you want to go like, I'm feeling this, acknowledge it. And then what is the signal? What is the signpost trying to tell me? Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful. Yeah. That's a beautiful example.
It really is. Yeah, I can relate to that in the sense of the body. I feel like all my signals have become physical signals.
Yeah.
And learning how to really listen to your body. You know, when you have a serious illness, your body really doesn't care about anything else other than trying to survive, right? You're just trying to survive. So you're kind of forced to listen to it. Like you really have to tune into the signals, right? Because your body just sort of stops working.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to keep going. You know, you have to change the way that you're showing up.
Yeah. And what does that feel like emotionally when you realize that you've got these problems and those might lead to limitations for what you're capable of doing? How do you react to that, Leslie?
Well, I think in a multitude of different ways, but for me specifically, I get very frustrated. I feel very angry. I can't do what I want to do, right? I felt a lot of disconnect when I was in the worst part of my illness. I felt like my mind wanted to do one thing and then my body was like, no, we're not doing that. So there's this disconnect that I had to kind of reconcile. But before I could reconcile it, I had to really notice these signals, these feelings, these strong emotions that were coming up. And I had to sit with that. I had to acknowledge it and be like, yeah, I am angry. I'm very frustrated that my body isn't working and not allowing me to show up in life the way that I would like to show up. Mm. It feels very strong. And for me, at the beginning, it felt a lot like anger and frustration.
Yeah.
Now, with regards to getting stuck, I mean, I have a good friend who is a writer and she just is coming out of severe writer's block. And I have to imagine that with art, like Esther, with your artistic processes, I have to imagine that sometimes you get stuck in kind of a more creative realm too. What does that feel like?
Yeah, well, I think getting stuck creatively is, that's like a whole different subject. I think we have a few different subjects going on here. Mm-hmm. We've got the physical body, which is, there's a lot of things that you can't control in that situation. You've got maybe your work situation, if you're like in a job or a place where you're living where maybe you can do more about that situation, right? And then you've got maybe the creative process. So I've studied a lot about the creative process, and the creative process is a little bit different. And I think we can return to maybe some of those other life situations after we talk about this. But the creative process, getting stuck in that situation, I like to tell my clients and people that, in this culture is all about focusing on the final product and focusing on getting things done, focusing on output. It's all about output, right? And so when we get into that mentality, it's really easy to get blocked because we're just focusing on output. But the creative process it's a cycle. It's like it has seasons, right? And so that's kind of what this podcast is about, is like the process of flow, right? My flow framework. And so what I would tell people who gets stuck is to go back to the top, the beginning of the flow framework, which is play and exploration and not taking things too seriously, doing something different, getting back into finding inspiration. So this process is what we're talking about in this podcast. And it's relevant to when you're feeling stuck in your life as well, right? So when you're looking to do anything new in your creative practice or anything new in your life, you have to start at the beginning, which is, what do I really love and what really excites me? And what am I finding joy in right now? I feel stuck because what I've been doing isn't working. And something else wants to come through, probably.
Right.
Like something else really cool, really different, really unique, that's just for me wants to come through. And I'm not letting it because I'm only focused on the outcome, right?
Right.
So it's a good example of the creative process, but it's also how we live our lives, right? So we live our lives, we're just like focused on the outcome of making money, making whatever we have chosen our path, trying to make it work. But something bigger and better wants to come through. So you have to go back to the beginning. It's like we're always renewing ourselves. We're always starting. And that's what people don't want to do. They want to have a plan, right? Our minds want to have a safety net, a plan. But life doesn't work that way. We're always going back to the beginning of this flow process, which is exploration, play. What is coming up for me now? What am I learning? What is life showing me now? And so when you're in the stuck place, wherever you are, even if you are like sick, like I've been through that, Leslie and I, this year was really hard for me with my migraines. I couldn't do anything. It's like when you're at that place though, what is life showing you? What is it? What is the new thing that wants to come through? And so wherever you are in your journey, like if you're at a job that you don't like, so I think going back to like getting to the place where you're getting really honest, that's the first step, right? Like our culture tells us that we should just think happy. We should just be satisfied. We should be grateful for where we are and just think positive and manifest whatever from a positive place. But if the suck kind of has to come first, right? Like feeling the suck, the suckiness, the honesty of that has to come first.
Absolutely.
Right. And we don't allow ourselves to play, because another message that we get from our society, from our culture, and from ourselves is that it's a waste of time to play.
Right.
Like if we're not producing anything that is going to go to our boss, or a piece of art that we could sell, or anything else, if we're not producing anything, it doesn't feel like we're making progress. And so we don't want to allow ourselves the time to do that.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel productive. But what you're saying is, like, if you don't have that change of orientation, like if you don't allow yourself to go into that more open mindset, then you will get stuck. Like inevitably, it will happen.
Yeah.
Right. You also need to think of it as, Esther, I think you've said this to me before about low stakes, right? Start at the low stakes entry point. And Allison, you're right. It's so difficult to give ourselves permission to do that. It's something that's not going to yield something for us monetarily or a promotion or whatever. Like we feel indulgent just letting ourselves have this low stakes fun and exploring that. But it's so critical, I think, of my own movement of trying to get unstuck, right? First, like I mentioned earlier, I had to be really angry and be okay with being angry about my situation and my limitations. And then I had to lean into, okay, what can I do that I feel joyful about? What does make me feel happy? I mean, really, without the guise of false positivity or just bucking up. No, I'm sad, but I'm still going to try this. And just allowing yourself to play with whatever that is and not putting any stakes on it.
Right.
It's definitely the first step.
Yeah. So I think like next podcast, we'll talk about more about what does that look like to play and explore with going from this stuckness to playing and exploring. And so the first step in that flow process is finding inspiration or finding your essence. And so like, I think in the next podcast, we'll get into like more of the nitty gritty of like, how do you do that? Like, how do you go from getting stuck to like getting into play and exploration? And like, what does that look like? Because that really is the first step. And allowing yourself to do that is so difficult for so many people. And it's exactly what you said. Like, it's the opposite of what we think that we should be doing. So like right now, what does it feel like to feel stuck in your life? Like if for people who are out there, you know, maybe they don't know what they want to do and they've been on this like last time we talked about like following the rules, like following the formula. Maybe they've been following the formula and they feel like they've gotten to the place where they did all the things and they feel stuck. Like, what does that feel like, you know?
Yeah. You know, I can't stop thinking about my first marriage, which was a terrible fit for me. And I was totally stuck in this awful situation where someone was making me feel just terrible about myself all the time. But I was reluctant to let go of the idea of staying married because like there's actually comfort in being stuck too. That's kind of hard to get over. So you can be stuck in a bad job or in a bad relationship or any sort of bad situation, but at least like you know what that is. You know what every day is going to look like. It's going to be crappy, but at least there aren't very many surprises. So that's another thing I want to acknowledge. Like one of the things that makes it hard to get unstuck is just that being stuck can become comforting.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. Yeah, the unknown is so scary. And sometimes that feels worse. Leaning into that feels worse than just the comfort of knowing what is, right? What's true right now.
I think that's what keeps most people stuck, you know? Is that our mind just wants us to be safe. Our mind only shows us what we've seen before. So we've been following this formula, you know, we've been following the formula and our mind feels like it's safe, but something feels wrong. Like just recently, I had like just this horrible year, you know, like just a really hard year. And I felt so stuck because one of my core values is exploration. And that means like travel. Like for me, it's really hard to explain, but I love sun. Like my body needs sun. I don't know how to explain this to people who don't have this in them, but people who need sun, like they understand this. And people who need travel and need to be exploring, it's just a part of your DNA. So I had a hard year and I literally felt like I was dying. And I asked my body what it needed and it said sun. And so I just extended my trip because I just felt like I was shriveling up and dying. Like that sense that we were talking about of like something's wrong. I felt like really something's wrong in my body and I felt stuck. And so it felt like the worst time. Like my mind was like, this is the worst time to be spending money, to be going somewhere, to be taking time off. My mind was giving me all these excuses. And I extended my stay, you know, it's only a week, but still. But I literally felt taking this trip like I've been reborn and everything inside of me just feels like, yes, you know, my soul, like just my body, everything just worked out. And it's just amazing how like when you follow those sort of like nudges from your intuition or like whatever's next to get you out of your rut, out of this kind of stuckness, whatever is the next step, it's amazing how your mind can tell you that it's not going to work out and all these things. But when you take that leap, it's just like
liberating.
Yeah.
And just like everything works out, like the things just work out. It's just amazing, you know?
That's a good point because you are rejuvenating yourself. And so that is going to allow you to be more creative,
more open.
Yeah.
And we don't see the value in that. It's like making time for yourself. Your mind doesn't see the value in spending time in play, but that actually gives you energy.
Right.
Right?
Because we're so conditioned, as we spoke to earlier, to not. And so you're constantly fighting this. No, that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be doing that. But that's so amazing that you leaned into that and it yielded such a beautiful feeling that you can return to, hopefully feeling more open and being able to move forward. And who knows what beautiful thing will be born from you.
Yeah. Well, not just that, but things start manifesting. Like, you know, I went to this very special beach. It's very connected to me. It's like where I just keep going back to. And I went there and spent a lot of time there. I met this amazing woman. It was like our souls connected. Like we were crying, like all these things happen. And then I come back to my car and like I got this email from this person that I had been waiting for 3 weeks to hear back from this proposal. Like, this is what I see with clients all the time is like, once they kind of take the step in the direction that their soul is calling them to, like things actually start manifesting in their life, like money, like clients, things like that. So I just want to encourage people, like, if you're feeling stuck too, find people like role models who have already done it or have lives that are encouraging you, who seem like they're living life, that are passionate or that they're doing what they're meant to do.
Who are your role models? I'm curious for both of you. Leslie, have you thought about this?
I haven't. I was just like, that's a really good question. I would have to think for a minute on that. But I do think that's a valuable thing to consider. Esther, I'm curious if you have an answer to that.
Well, yes, I just sent out a newsletter today about it. I mean, so Bjork has been like a role model for me. This is a part of my framework too, is like, I talk about like using this as a way to get yourself unstuck, right? And so Bjork always just shows me that it's okay to be like freaky and like your authentic self and do whatever the fuck you want, right? And follow those passions, because when you do, you're going to find your people.
Yes. Yeah. You don't have to connect with everyone. You have to connect with the people who are going to feed your soul, who you're going to be kindred spirits with.
Yeah.
With the Bjork example, it just made me think about how she performed at the Olympics several years back. And the commentators were like, oh, here's Bjork being weird again.
Exactly.
And I'm sure there are a lot of people who are like that, who just think like, oh, she's weird. I don't get it. But so many people love her for exactly those same things.
Exactly.
That push some people away from her. And it's okay to not be loved by everyone.
Yes. I was just thinking of an author that popped into my mind of someone that I would think of as a role model is Lydia Yucknovich.
Tell us about her.
She's written a lot of fiction, but she's probably most known in the writing community for her memoir, The Chronology of Water. And she has like a literary center called Corporeal Writing in Oregon. And she does a TED Talk, it's worth listening to, about being a misfit and just kind of, like not fitting in and not doing it the right way. And she really embodies all of that. And then finally she got to a place where she was really honest with herself and things just kind of started happening. And she met the love of her life. She started writing, all these amazing things. And she just really leaned into her self, right? Like just into herself and didn't care about pleasing everyone or doing it the right way. She worked in the academic world for a really long time and realized that's not really the space for her, that she was trying to conform and be something that she's not. I mean, I'm not trying to put words in her story. Like, look up her TED Talk about misfits, Lydia Yucknovich. She's amazing.
How do you spell Yucknovich? We'll have to put that in the show notes.
Yes.
We'll get it in the show notes. Don't worry about it.
We'll put it in the show notes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, she's someone I definitely would look up to as being living in their authentic self.
That is so fascinating to me because I didn't think about it that way before, but the person who popped into my mind is Pamela Harris. And she is a Latina mathematician who is really vocal about how we need to provide radically different kinds of support for mathematicians of color. And she has definitely burned some bridges in that process, but so many people are so inspired by her work. And, the people who are inspired by her are just like giving her so much more love. The support is so overwhelming that she is able to actually make a big change in the culture of mathematics. And she kind of had to piss some people off in order to do that. Like, I don't think you can make progress without pissing some people off. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that we are really afraid of. Like, we want to please everyone.
Yes.
And once we realize that that shouldn't be the goal, that, we can make the greatest progress and live our most authentic lives if we're not trying to please everyone else, that's kind of liberating. Mm-hmm. And you'll realize, like, if you're living in this really authentic way and you're able to be yourself, that will attract people to you. People will really pick up on that. And there's like a magnetism that comes from being really authentic because it makes you happier. It makes you lighter. It makes you more approachable. So I think that's an interesting aspect of all three of our role model examples.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's an energy shift for people when they enter that space. And like you're saying, Allison, I do think that really draws people in because it's comforting to be around someone who feels that calm. There's a calmness, I think, that exists in that.
That's funny because I wouldn't describe Pamela Harris as calm.
Not in their personality. No, I wouldn't say that per se about Lydia either. She's very animated, but it's just like you can tell when someone is centered.
Yes.
It's that kind of energy that's calming. I mean, It's not like literally that they're calm, but it's just an internal, like, it's deep, right? It's like a deep pull that you can feel.
Yeah. How I describe it is like it's a connection to your essence, right? Mm-hmm. So this is like really what we are talking about in this podcast is like, how do we really connect to more of our essence, like who we really are? And when we connect to that part of ourselves, and it's sort of like we have to remove all the layers of what we've been taught, right? Mm-hmm. So this feeling stuck is kind of like we're kind of stuck in all of the layers that we've been taught that we should be. And removing all the layers of what we've been taught that we should, all those shoulds, right? Of like maybe like an armor that we've created around us where we've boxed ourselves into, like, when we can just be free, like Bjork or like Pamela or Lydia, like when we can access that real authentic essence of ourself, people are drawn to it because it's like that vulnerability, like you sense somebody's essence, like who they authentically are. And then it's almost like it just flows through you. It doesn't even almost matter what you're saying because people sense, like I'd say that when you are reading somebody or you are picking up somebody's art or you're listening to a TED Talk from somebody, what you're really connecting to is their essence. Mm-hmm. And your essence is connecting to their essence. And what I mean by essence is just like your personality. You know how babies like come into the world. They all have unique personalities. Like they just do.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
They do. Yeah,
Yeah.
like they just do. And so each one of us has that, right? And so a lot of times this feeling stuck is us pushing that down.
Yeah.
And the feeling of feeling stuck is the resistance of that wanting to come up. It's like that authentic self or that essence actually wanting to come up more,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
you know, and us being like, nope, we don't do that here. Nope. Right. And so it's that
Yes.
resistance. And so how do you let go of the resistance? And I think like going back to really like, what is the first step? It's like getting really real. Like, this is how I feel right now. Like, this is coming up. What's coming up? You know, like,
What's coming up?
what is
Yeah.
it? Like, what is my essence trying to say? Like, what is
Mhm.
coming up?
Like really leaning into that.
Yeah, leaning into it. So the more we try to resist, the shittier it's going to feel.
Oh, yes.
And the more you feel like you're just spinning your wheels, you're like, why can't I do this? And then, yeah, you got to lean into that resistance a little bit.
You're setting us up, Esther, for the homework assignment that we're about to give people.
Yeah. So how do we tell people, like, where you all out there, like, how might people be feeling and how do we help them? What's the first step? Because we've been giving, so at the end of each episode, we're giving you like a little 4% of little homework,
A little goal. Yeah.
tiny little goal. So how might people be feeling right now in their lives? And then number two, like, what can they do? Like, what can be the next step? And then next week, we're going to talk about how can we get to the juicy part of like that play and exploration of what you actually want to do next.
That is so exciting.
Yeah. So how might people be feeling right now if they're feeling stuck?
Yeah. So last week we asked you to think about how you feel stuck, and we want to invite you to go a little bit deeper into that. And that could look like free writing about how you feel stuck. It could look like journaling, like making mental notes throughout your week as something happens. You notice, like, oh, every time I encounter this person or get an email like this, I feel my chest tighten up. So just noticing and writing down stuff like that. If you're like me, you need to talk it out. So if you want to really explore how you're feeling stuck, talk to someone. Like say, hey, I'm feeling a little bit off about this thing. Can we talk about it? Whatever way feels most authentic for you, whether it's talking or writing or just observing your body reactions to things, keep track of that over the next week or two. And that'll allow us to start thinking about how to take that input and use it to move forward in a different direction.
Well, just remember, like, your feelings are road signs. So acknowledge the road sign. I think that's just such a big step of like, I'm feeling this. And like, I was listening to Glennon Doyle's podcast, and they were saying, I think Martha Beck was saying, like, when she was really feeling stuck, like she had to go in her room and just scream, cry, and like just write all the things down that were like not working and just, whatever you need to do, but just the acknowledgement really of like, this is not working, recognizing. And I think also kind of like looking at people whose lives you admire. And I mean, I know that's another step, so maybe we shouldn't do that. We'll talk about that later. But yeah. So if anybody doesn't know free writing is when it's kind of like journaling, but from sort of a deeper place of the unconscious where you're just like stream of consciousness writing. You're not like worrying about spelling or anything. Just literally write like fuck for like a page, you know.
Don't edit yourself.
Don't edit. Yeah.
Just let it go and be really honest. I think that's so powerful about the acknowledging. And Allison, I really like the call to pay attention to what it feels like in your body.
Yeah.
When you're feeling stuck and what is causing that and how your body's responding. Because on the flip side of that, I think it will be important to notice what your body feels like, you know, when we move to the next step about what makes you feel good. And so I think it's good to understand the different places where it hits you in the body and acknowledge that too. I think that's a powerful piece.
Yes. I could talk about that so much. What is the sense in your body? Because that's really where we hold all of our emotion and our memory is in our body.
Wonderful. Well, that's almost a wrap. We want to remind you to please like the podcast, subscribe on whatever podcast platform you use. Esther, I know you wanted to talk about some YouTube resources that relate to this topic.
Yeah. So you can check out my YouTube channel, Esther Loopstra. So if you just search for my name in YouTube, we'll have a link to that. I have a lot of resources about this process and finding time, finding energy for taking those next steps, getting unstuck. So go ahead and follow that. I'm also taking clients for my 6-month coaching package. If you're feeling stuck, I also have a 2-hour session if you're feeling stuck, which was really helped people get unstuck. It's been really amazing for people. So yeah, check out those resources on my website, flowintoauthenticity.com. So anything else you two want to plug?
Nope.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
Yeah.
I just want to tell people to have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope people are finding some sort of way to get some sun in their lives or whatever their version of sun and warmth is. I'll be looking for it myself here.
We need
in
it.
rainy Seattle. Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
We will talk to you next time on Flow to Authenticity. Bye.
Bye. Flow into Authenticity is hosted by Esther Loopstra, Leslie Blumenstein, and me, Allison Henrich. Our original theme music is by James Wetzel. Podcast editing is by Dave Visaya. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share Flow into Authenticity from your favorite podcast app.